What? Well, I'll be. Honey, we got ourselves a visitor. I'll get the coffee brewing.
Oh, my God! Oh, you about gave me a heart attack.
Not that we're not thrilled to see you, son, but I thought you were under contract with Argos Extractors. Is everything all right?
So I told my parents what happened. After the gig with Argos Extractors went sideways, and by sideways I mean pirates showed up and ruined everybody's day, I was told to take this strange artifact and head to Constellation. Simple enough, right? No, of course not. Before I could go anywhere, we had to deal with the Crimson Fleet. I was accompanied by a robot named Vasco, who seemed helpful, professional, and only slightly too excited to remind me what I was supposed to be doing. Together, we headed to Kreet. Now, at this point, I had not seen much of the galaxy. Mining was really the only life I knew. So when we landed on Kreet, something changed. Vasco started giving me information about the local life forms, the terrain, the environment. And I looked around and thought, Mira, this place is actually beautiful. That was when my mission changed. Vasco wanted to focus on the Crimson Fleet and get back to Constellation. Me? I was not in a hurry. I had a scanner, a ship, and questionable backup. So I decided to look around. I wanted to explore, survey the area, build my own map of the galaxy. People needed to know what was out there. Maybe I would even write a book one day. Or a movie. Call it something dramatic like Star Wars. Actually, that sounds familiar. Maybe somebody already used that back when people still lived on Earth. Anyway, exploration is finding a place. Surveying is proving what's out there. And who knows? Maybe some poor sap will pay for the information. Kind of like an unmarked side quest. Eventually, we solved our Crimson Fleet problem. Mostly so Vasco would stop talking about it. Or so I thought. Nice robot, very smart, very helpful. But after we handled the pirates, he started going on about his friend and Constellation again. And listen, I respect loyalty. I respect friendship. But I had already made up my mind. I was going to explore the rest of Kreet. Or at least enough of it to get a proper read on what this place really was. And let me correct myself. Kreet was not actually a planet. It was a moon. But for a moon, it had a lot going on. Outposts, abandoned labs, pirates, robots, wildlife, the whole welcome package. No mames, this moon was busier than some cities. One of the first places I stumbled across was an abandoned bionics lab. Since most of this was new to me, and since curiosity has apparently been making bad decisions for explorers since the beginning of time, I decided to check it out. The moment I stepped onto the property, I knew I was in hostile territory. Especially when a robot came out of nowhere and started attacking me. Now, I do not know what that robot thought was going to happen, but it was no match for me and Vasco. And honestly, in that moment, I loved that robot. Vasco had my back. Then, right when I thought I was clear to look around, some pirate decided to charge me with a knife. A knife against a man with a gun. Compadre, that is not bravery, that is bad math. So I showed him why you do not bring a knife to a gunfight. After that, I realized I was not going to be able to explore in peace unless every pirate and every hostile robot in the area was taken care of. So I went inside. Once I entered the lab, I cleared out the lobby and started looking around. There was mostly junk, a few cred sticks here and there, some ammo, and then, oh, meatloaf. I love meatloaf. So I kept moving through the place, checking rooms, grabbing what seemed useful, and trying not to think too hard about all the dead scientists lying around. Outside of some loose credits, bullets, and that beautiful meatloaf, I did not take much. In fact, I left a cred stick sitting on the counter. Why? Because maybe some poor soul would come in later on a rescue mission, see the murdered staff, then see the dead pirates, then realize the pirates were murdered by me. Circle of life. I kept going deeper into the facility. More dead scientists, more pirates. One guy who got shot in the back of the head before he even knew I was there. Look, I am not proud of everything, but I am alive. To make a long story short, I cleared the facility and found some pretty useful gear for my troubles. Then, as I was leaving, I ran into a heat leech. Now, I do not know what came over me. Something in my instincts just said, that thing has to go. I missed the first shot, and the next thing I knew, I was chasing this little creature down like it owed me money. I ran it down and bashed it until it was dead. At that point, I started wondering if I was truly making my own choices out here. Because that did not feel like exploration. That felt personal. After the lab, I continued across Kreet and eventually found a military encampment. I figured, military camp? Safe enough. Wrong again. As I got closer, I saw a dead UC Marine on the ground and some guy rummaging through their things. We exchanged a few words, and he made it very clear that he did not slaughter everyone. Which, honestly, is a very suspicious thing to clarify. But was it my business? No. Did it seem shady? Absolutely. Did I still look around? Of course I did. While I was picking through the place, Vasco decided to inform me that if I kept carrying so much, I would develop back problems. I appreciated the concern, but also, mind your business, metal man, I can handle it. After I grabbed what I needed, I moved on. Eventually, after exploring a cave, I ran into some of the local wildlife. Now, for the record, picking fights with Kreet stalkers and Kreet grazers was not my best idea, but I was still learning, and by learning, I mean getting attacked by everything with legs. According to the scanner, Kreet had 3 types of flora: nebula vine, frost reed, and dust root. It also listed 3 types of fauna: trilobites, Kreet stalkers, and Kreet grazers. And for the plants, that seemed true. For the animals, well, apparently the scanner had jokes. I was minding my own business, walking across the land, scanning, surveying, trying to find the last missing flora. Everything seemed normal. Then the mood changed. You know when a place suddenly feels too quiet? Yeah, no bueno. Then Vasco said, "I don't feel pain." And I remember thinking, okay, weird time to brag. That was when I saw it. This massive creature was tearing into my robot buddy like Vasco owed it money. Vasco went down, and then the thing turned toward me. Now, I would like to say I handled the situation with courage and professionalism. I did not. I jumped around like a madman, burned through med packs, and tried very hard not to become part of Kreet's natural food chain. Eventually, I managed to take the creature down, and then, like nothing happened, Vasco was suddenly back on his feet. Apparently, he had time to repair himself while I was doing all the heavy lifting. I asked him, "What the hell was that?" He said, "My HP reached 0. I said, "No, that thing." And he said, "Oh, they are called Terrormorphs." That was the moment I decided Vasco was going home as soon as possible, because if that was the kind of information he was going to give me after I almost died, I did not need him around. Very smart robot, sure, but his timing? Terrible. Still, I was not done with Kreet yet, so I kept him with me a little longer. Later, we ran into a man waiting for his crew to return. I offered to take him wherever he needed to go, but he said they would be back soon. I am pretty sure they left him on purpose. I got that vibe. Still, he gave me some supplies he claimed he no longer needed, so I took them, thanked him, and moved on. If he wanted to keep pretending his crew was coming back, that was between him and the stars. At this point, I still needed to scan more flora to complete the survey, so I headed back to the ship, dropped off some supplies, and flew to a different biome. First, I went to the frozen region, where I finally found frost reed. After that, All I needed was dust root. So I left the frozen wasteland and headed toward the volcanic region. Sure enough, that was where I found what I needed. After enough scanning, enough walking, enough fighting, and enough questioning my life choices, I finally had the data to complete Kreet's survey. Kreet was 100% surveyed. And after running into a Terrormorph, pirates, hostile robots, abandoned labs, dead Marines, suspicious scavengers, and a lonely man who was definitely abandoned by his crew, I had seen enough. Before leaving, I cleared out one more science facility for supplies, because apparently I had not learned my lesson about walking into abandoned buildings full of danger. Then I packed up, got back to the ship, and left Kreet behind. My first real stop in the galaxy was complete, and all it took was a scanner, a robot, a few bullets, a lot of med packs, and the growing suspicion that space exploration was going to be way more complicated than anybody told me.